Ever since we stepped foot in those factory doors, we've had so much stuff happen to us, all in the span of 1 or 2 days, to the point where we're pretty much out of toys now, and it seems like the series is coming to a close. But what would have happened if we never showed up? Would all the toys still be alive? Are we really the cause for all of these bad things happening? Well, let's figure that out. I'm gonna be going through each chapter to see what would be different and what could have happened instead if we had never showed up. Firstly, in chapter 1, not too much happens except for the fall of Huggy Wuggy, where he falls down to the bottom of the factory, sustaining many injuries and barely surviving. Which means if we had never showed up, it's possible that instead of chasing us around and eventually becoming severely injured, he would have just continued to roam the factory, most likely as one of the prototype subjects. Now going into chapter 2 is where things start to get interesting, because in the very end of chapter 1, we freed Poppy from her case, and if we hadn't shown up to the factory, then Poppy would still be stuck in there. In chapter 2, we wake up after being knocked out, and then follow Poppy to a giant hole in the ground where she's kidnapped by Mommy Longlegs. And in order to get Poppy back, we play a series of 3 games, which ends up getting Bunzo Bunny and the Wuggies killed. Which means if we hadn't shown up, they wouldn't have died. But also if we hadn't shown up, Mommy Longlegs wouldn't have died, because in the end of the game, we managed to find a grinder which kills her. But believe me, it gets much worse, because in chapter 3, we're eventually brought down to the school by the prototype. And in the school, we're attacked by Miss Delight, but we managed to escape by shutting a gate right down on her bottom jaw. But it gets sadder, because eventually we go down to the school's prison, where we find Dog Day being tortured and barely alive. But before we can do anything to help him, he's eaten alive by a bunch of mini smiling critters which crawl inside of his body and take possession of him, turning him into nothing but a shell.
Listen to me. You need to get out of this place. You need to live. You and Poppy could fix this. End this madness. The torment. Oh no. Oh no. Leave me. Please, just go!
And although we don't necessarily see him die, because he was possessed by the smiling critters, we can assume that Dog Day died, but now his body is being controlled by the many smiling critters. But then we're led into a boss fight with Catnap, where we don't kill him but shock him. And it's the prototype who comes into the room and kills him for a reason that we still don't know yet. And in the very end of the game, when we go down the elevator to the labs, Kissy was attacked by something. And it was pretty bad, because in chapter 4 we see that she sustained a lot of injuries, literally needing a makeshift sling for her arm. Which means if we had never showed up, Huggy would be fine. Mommy Longlegs, Bunzo Bunny, all of the Wuggies, Miss Delight, Dog Day, and Catnap would still be alive, and Kissy wouldn't have gotten injured. And we're not even in chapter 4 yet. In chapter 4 we make it down to the bottom of the factory, where we kill so many toys. The first was Yarnaby, who tried to kill us, but thankfully got caught on a hook while trying to chase us and fell down into a pit of lava. Then we killed Harley Sawyer, otherwise known as the Doctor, by going to where he was stored and removing his Omni chip. Then in the end of the game, we killed Doey when he pinned the blame of Safe Haven's destruction on us by pulling a giant drill down on top of him. But these are just the deaths that we caused. There are so many others in chapter 4 that wouldn't have happened if we hadn't shown up. For example, when we fall into some kind of enclosure where Pianosaurus was eating something, Doey grabs him, smashes him to bits, and eats him.
Now that hit the spot. I haven't eaten in weeks.
but I'm pretty sure that Doughy would have eaten him anyway, because Doughy was already nearby and was starving to the point where he'd eat his fellow experiments. Later in the game though, when Harley tried to test our morality, we were given two options: kill Simon Smoke or die. Harley thought that we were going to kill him in order to save ourselves, but there was actually a third option where you could escape through a hole in the ceiling and not have to kill Simon. However, most of us didn't realize that and ended up killing him in order to progress in the game. And some of y'all called me a cold-blooded killer. I didn't know. And last but definitely not least were the toys that were killed in Safe Haven, which happened all because we managed to get the Omni chip from Sawyer and tried to fix the generator, which lowered the defenses, allowing the prototype a way into Safe Haven, which killed so many toys to the point where Doughy tried to kill us. So far, it seems like us coming into the factory was the worst thing that could have happened to all of the toys. But there is one detail that I've left out until now, and it's the fact that all of the toys were starving to death when we showed up, which means that if we hadn't shown up, the toys would have likely died pretty quickly anyway, as some of the toys in Safe Haven were asking each other whether Harley or starvation will be what kills them.
When's the last time you ate? I can't remember, honestly. Neither can I. It feels like forever. Which will kill us first, you think? The doctor or hunger? I prefer not to even think about it.
And there's also the fact that the prototype has been ruling over the factory ever since the Hour of Joy, where the toys have had to live lives trying to escape and barely maintain a shelter hidden away from him using a generator that's off the grid. And this wasn't just some kind of hideaway life, but their friends were killed by the prototype, reminding them that he's coming to kill every last one of the toys. Because in one of the chapter 4 tapes, we hear Hoppy Hopscotch talking with some of the other toys during a medical emergency, but later in one of the notes we read on the back of it that it says Hoppy died, which means that every once in a while they lose some of their closest friends to the prototype. So honestly, if we hadn't have shown up, the toys would have had much slower, much more painful deaths, and would continue to live lives in misery until they'd eventually all starve to death. So now that we're here, we have to do the absolute best that we can do, which means that we'll have to find some way to kill the prototype and put an end to everything that has happened so far in the factory, and maybe, just maybe, free the orphans and give them lives outside of Playcare, where they can be children in a real orphanage, or maybe even in their own new homes. But what do you guys think? Let me know down in the comments. Thanks for watching, subscribe, and click on this video right here.